Welcome to Leading for Life Stories, Season 3. I'm Bob Judson, I'm the host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Regardless of whether you're a seasoned listener who's been with me since the beginning, or whether you've just dropped in for the occasional episode, I really hope you enjoyed the mix of content that I provide, the personal stories, the thematic episodes, and the guests that I have on the show. And I hope you find it all interesting and at least some of it useful. And without further ado, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. Just before we get into this week's guest, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or follow if you're listening to a podcast platform, because that really helps to boost the overall numbers that we have registered on the podcast. It boosts the stats, it helps the reach of the podcast, and that makes a big difference. So I'd be really appreciative if you would do that right now before we really start this week. But my guest this week is Stella. Absolutely amazing. She is the award-winning, inspirational, and frankly quite extraordinary Sally Orange, MBE. Now, Sally spent a long time in the army as a physiotherapist, and she'll talk about that. But she's also had a lifelong challenge with mental health and speaks these days as a mental health campaigner on a wide range of platforms. But beyond that, she's an adventure athlete who raises enormous amounts of money for charity and does the most extraordinary things. And I'm not going to spoil it by telling you here, because I'm going to let her do it in her own words, because it's just so much more compelling. And frankly, made me feel completely inadequate listening to the things she's done, the things she's achieved, which are by any measure utterly extraordinary. She's also, tragically, currently being treated for breast cancer. So it was amazing that she was even willing to come on the podcast and talk to me. And it's testament to the woman that she is, that she wanted to do that and wanted to share her story as she's currently undergoing chemotherapy. And it makes an incredibly powerful episode and quite an emotional episode in many ways for me as I made it. Because I really was very, very inspired by everything she had to say. And it's a terrific episode. I really, really hope you enjoy it, because there aren't many people around like this that I've met. I've met some fantastic people doing the podcast and some fantastic people in wider life, but very few have been quite as inspirational as Sally. And without further ado, off we go. Hi, Sally. Fantastic to have you on the show. I'm so grateful, especially given some of the things we'll get on to talk about as well, that you're able to come on. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating conversation. Really look forward to it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Bob. Looking forward to it.
You've had, by any measure, I've had some amazing guests over time, but I look at your life and what you've done and the kind of extreme challenges you've subjected yourself to, as well as obviously having spent a long time in the military to start off with, and all those sorts of things. But it's just been an amazing journey, and obviously, challenged now by the fact that obviously, you for a long time, you've been a keynote speaker talking about mental health and your challenges with that, but challenged now by the fact that obviously you're currently undergoing cancer treatment. And that's why I'm so delighted you still feel able to come on the show, and I'm very grateful to you. But just tell us that story. It's just an amazing thing that you've been up to with your life.
Oh, well, thank you. Very, very kind. I guess it kind of first started at the age of 16, where I went ice skating for the day with my boyfriend at the time, and I fell over and broke my leg. Ended up having to have a month in hospital and metal work and lots of surgery on my leg. And unfortunately, my boyfriend at the time went off with my best friend while I was in hospital. So that wasn't the greatest time of my life, I have to say. But there's always a silver lining. And that time in hospital really cemented that I wanted to become a physiotherapist. So I was doing my A-levels at the time, and I got my results. And unfortunately, I failed my A-levels. But I was determined and decided, right, I'm going to go back to college, resit my A-levels, because I definitely want to do physio. And the next year, another year of study, I got my A-level results, and unfortunately, they were even worse than the first year. I crippling anxiety with exams. In fact, even to this day, if you call it an exam, I go into a cold sweat and panic. And yeah, that what seemed like potentially was going to be the the end of the physiotherapy journey. But my A levels by this time did actually spell U-dunce, which I thought was quite ingenious to work out. And so they were good enough to go to university. So I thought, right, well, I'll go and do radiography. That's similar to physio. Not at all, it turns out. And after 6 weeks on the course, I thought, this isn't for me. I was doing my I was doing my placement, doing barium enemas on patients, thinking, I do not want to spend my life doing this. And so I thought, right, I'm going to transfer onto a different degree that hopefully will help me be able to get onto a physio degree later. And so I transferred to Leeds Metropolitan University, as it was then, to start a health studies degree. I did it there because they also did physiotherapy there as well. And I thought each year I could maybe transfer onto the physio. That wasn't the case. I wasn't able to transfer, but I did finish that degree. Every year I applied for physiotherapy, but every year I got rejected. So, got a long story short, I first applied to become a physiotherapist in 1991, and I finally graduated. I finally got a place in 1997. So it took me 6 years to
Wow, well
actually
done for the
get.
persistence.
Thank you. Yeah, to actually get on to that. I'd got my degree, my health studies degree, and then got a place. Another 3 year study. So I finally then graduated in 2000, 9 years after first applying. And it was then that my sort of career in the NHS started. I did my junior rotations. And then while I was at university that second time or third time at the Nottingham University, which is where I studied physio, I found out about the Officers Training Corps and joined that, and had no military background whatsoever. Um, and just thought, well, this looks fun. You can go and do, some amazing things, meet amazing people. And yeah, so I did that during that time. And then a couple of years into my junior rotations, a full-time position with the Army came up at a rehab centre on a full-time reserve service contract. So I was sort of mobilised to that rehabilitation centre to be the 2IC of that. And yeah, I've since I went on and I did 22 years in the Royal Army Medical Corps as a physiotherapist, mainly as a reservist. So I did 7 years FTRS, and then the rest of it was sort of weekends and drill nights during the week. But it was essentially my life. I touched on the anxiety that I had sort of with exams, but that anxiety was a thread that sort of ran all through my life. And unfortunately, it got very, very severe, and the depression got very severe as well. And it got to the point where I actually couldn't see a reason to be on this earth. I didn't leave the house for 2 months. I didn't speak on the phone for 2 years. And so it amazes no one more than me now that I choose to be a speaker and talk about what I've been through, because that was by far the worst nightmare that I could have ever envisaged. But I think sometimes when you have a real drive and a purpose, and I don't want to see anyone else having to go through what I went through because of that shame and that guilt. So I now speak about it in the hope that other people will, get the help that they need. And I've sort of gone about by doing that dressed as different pieces of fruit. I speak dressed as different pieces of fruit, but I also take on different endurance challenges, ranging from, I've done 87 marathons now, 8 Ironman triathlons. I've swam the Channel twice. I have cycled across America, put together the first all-female wounded, injured and sick team to take on the race across America, cycling from the west to the east of America, cycled the length of New Zealand, climbed a couple of big mountains, and yeah, sort of try and give a purpose to a lot of the challenges I do. So I did a marathon underground, the world's deepest underground marathon.
Where was that?
It was in a mine up in North Yorkshire, and called it Beneath the Surface because you never know what's going on beneath the surface. But I also did another one in 6 days before the mine one in a pod of the London Eye. And I did that to symbolise the highs and lows, or the ups and downs that the nation went through with their mental health during the pandemic.
Was that on a
So
treadmill then or something in the London Eye?
yes, yeah, I got a treadmill in a pod, dressed as an orange. Unfortunately, the London Marathon, it was the virtual London Marathon, and they wouldn't actually accept it as a marathon because it was on a treadmill. And I knew this in advance, luckily. So not to be deterred, I got off the treadmill after I'd finished that marathon. I then went back to my hotel room, put on a lemon costume, and went and did another marathon around the streets of London, past the bells of St Clement's. So I had been oranges and lemons past the bells of St Clement's. So I finally got that medal. And yeah, I've swam from Alcatraz, and liken Alcatraz to being a prisoner in your own mind. Obviously, Alcatraz is a prison, and the feelings I imagine, being in prison are sort of shame, guilt, isolation, loneliness, which transferred to what it's like living with anxiety and depression. And so, yeah, I've sort of gone about doing that with lots of different. I've probably done over 500 different events now over the last 18 years, and I've raised nearly £1 million for over 50 different charities. Um, so I did
Yeah,
unfortunately
fantastic.
get medically discharged from the army because of my poor mental health. And that's why I'm now so passionate about changing the conversation. And the reason for the fruit, quite often, I guess, why are you dressed as an apple, orange, or banana, or whatever? And first of all, it makes people smile. And it's always nice to make people smile. But then they'll ask, why are you dressed as apple, orange, or banana? And I say, I want to change the conversation and break the stigma associated with poor mental health. And more often than not, somebody will say that perhaps they or someone they know has had a problem. And it just really subtly opens up that conversation in a way that if I was just in shorts and t-shirt, I, wouldn't have that chance to do that. So and sort of coming to a bit of a conclusion of all of that, and a bit of a nice round off, is that Nottingham University was who I applied to for 6 years in a row, and where I actually eventually ended up going and studying physiotherapy. And 30 years after I first applied, so back in 2021, I received an email in my junk box saying that Nottingham University would like to award me an honorary doctorate for services to physiotherapy and mental health. So
Oh, well, that is
obviously,
lovely. Yeah.
yes, yeah. So I said no. No, I didn't. I yeah. So I got to then go and meet undergraduates who were also qualifying as as a physiotherapist, and told them some of my journey up to that point. So I think that's a really good message for young people, that if you really want to do something, or older people, if you really want to do something, then with the right sort of drive and determination, you can get there in the end.
Wow. I mean, that is the most incredible story and the incredible set of achievements. I mean, well done you. I mean, for all sorts of things in there. I mean, for your persistence and your drive to actually get to do the physio thing, but then particularly on the back of what some by any measure was obviously a pretty horrible adverse experience, to turn that around and do what you've been doing. I mean, I thought done quite well with 2 London marathons. I feel rather pathetic now, if I'm honest. Haven't that
Yeah, I've
87
now done
marathons?
87. I've been lucky that I've done the London Marathon 14 times. Every single time has been a charity place. So no, I tell a lie. One year I did get a ballot place in that time, but all the rest have all been charity places. So
So have you ticked off this? There's a thing, isn't there, of when you all the big city global marathons? Have you
yeah,
done that?
there's the no, well, there's the six majors, which is now the seven majors because of Sydney, which happened a couple of weeks ago. I haven't actually done a lot of those, but I did do a challenge called the World Marathon Challenge, which was 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days. Which there's only 5 British females who've ever taken that on, and it literally is, as it says on the tin, that you get on a plane. Well, it started in Antarctica, and that as soon as we arrived in Antarctica, that's when the clock started. Then it was from Antarctica to Cape Town, and that was so I'd literally within 24-hour period been in -30, and then suddenly was doing another marathon at +30. Straight after that, it was onto the airplane, flying to Perth in Australia. And literally, whatever time the plane arrived, it might be 3 o'clock in the morning or it might be 8 o'clock at night, you had to run the marathon. So it was from Australia to Dubai, Madrid, Madrid to Fortaleza in Brazil, and then finished in Miami. So yeah, that was the second time I did a marathon in Antarctica. I had done one previously, dressed as a pear. So I like to tell people that I got my nice pear out in the freezing cold Antarctica. And so the second one, so when I did the World Marathon Challenge, I'd already done a marathon on every continent first time. And Antarctica was the kind of the pinnacle that allowed me to say that I'd done that. And that's the one that I did dressed as different pieces of fruit. And that was over, several years. But the one in 7 days, I knew there was a high potential for failure with that. And I have a brain that doesn't react very well to failure. I don't think any of us do particularly, but I have this constant narrative that I'm not good enough. And I think the fact that I was rejected from university all of those times cemented the fact that I really wasn't good enough. And that was, 9 rejections every year because it was polys and universities that you could apply to at that time. So bearing in mind that I knew there was a high chance of failure, I kind of put a little buffer in, and I decided to give myself another challenge in that I was now want to do a marathon on every continent dressed as a vegetable. And so I thought Antarctica is the hardest marathon most expensive and hardest to get to. So I'm going to do my first marathon of the World Marathon Challenge dressed as vegetable. And going to Antarctica, I knew I was going to be frozen. So if you're going to be a frozen vegetable, what do you think you would choose?
A pea probably or something, were you?
So I dressed as a pod of peas for that. And it was brilliant because the first marathon, it was a plane that everybody on that plane was doing the same event. So there was about 40 of us all doing the same event. And for that first marathon, everybody had got their goggles on, their hats on, their buffs up to here. So you couldn't tell who anyone was, except I was there in this great big pea costume. So everybody knew from the start, exactly who I was and why I was doing it. So as I say, I'm pleased to say that I did manage to go on and do all of the others.
That's an incredible challenge. So the flight time counts in the 7 days, right? So because I've been to Australia a couple of times for work, and just the sheer time it takes to get there. Okay, from the UK, so you're really compressed in terms of your available time on the ground to do those 7 marathons.
16 different time zones that we went through as well, and your only time to sleep was on the plane, and that was sleep, eat, recover. On the plane. So
wow.
Yeah, it was quite a mindset that you needed to achieve that.
And I'm hoping you're going to tell me you've been sponsored for these sorts of things and so on, have you? Or
for most of them, no. I did for that one. It actually took me 4 years to get the sponsorship to go and do that. And the reason I wanted to do it was because the mental health, it's a pandemic. Essentially, it's an epidemic that, mental health around the world is, a struggle for a lot of people. And so I really wanted to take the message around the world. And then the year after, I wanted to take it to the top of the world. And so I went and did the Everest Marathon, the highest marathon in the world, to really shout about it from the top of the world as well.
Wow. Have you always been super sporty? I mean, just your fitness level to be able to do some of those challenges is immense. I mean, 7 marathons in 7 days is incredible. So
I was sporty up until I was 16, till I broke my leg. So I remember being 7 years old and watching the very first London Marathon and thinking, wow, that looks amazing. I want to do that one day. It just took me until I was 34 until I plucked up the courage to do any of it. So my first marathon was in 2007. So yeah, not always. And even now, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an athlete uh, because I don't go particularly,
I
particularly
think I
fast.
disagree with that. I mean, it's not, but just the stamina to do, as you said, so you run a marathon on a treadmill in the London Eye, then you get out of the treadmill on the London Eye and or get off the treadmill, and you head off around doing another marathon. I mean, that
That
is,
medal,
yeah,
that
that
was
is
fun.
athleticism by any measure. That's an incredible achievement. Oh,
I
wow.
always say, I always say to people, because quite often with marathons, people will say, "What time are you going for?" or "What time did you get?" And I completely turn it around and say, what time are you going for? And I say, the time of my life. Because for me, it's not about the time. If because for me, that's another pressure. If I tell myself I want to do 4 hours and I have that as a goal and I am not successful, then that feels a failure. Whereas if I tell myself, there could be lots of things that get in my way. There could be the weather, there could be part of my kit, my lace comes undone, or I have a fall or an injury, or, something that I can't control. But if I tell myself I'm there for a good time, it means that if somebody else is struggling, I can chat to them and help them. And if I see supporters that I know in the crowd, I can stop and go and thank them. So it just changes the way I run marathons. It suits me better. And means I have good fun and meet people along the way.
Yeah, I can completely identify with that. I did two London marathons, 96, 97, and the first one I did, I had no idea what time I was going to do. I'd done a fair bit of training. I thought just going to go out and see what it was like. And of course, in those days, you didn't have the chip on your shoe and those sorts of things either. So the time you got was when the gun started. That was when the clock started.
Oh, right.
And so
Yes. Yeah.
inevitably, it took you a period of time to get over the start line. You had to run your own time to know what you'd actually run. And I did 3:56, I think, on the first time. And I thought, well, okay, it's not
Well
bad.
done.
But I have to say, to your doing two in a row, I mean, I crossed the start line and I was like one of those cars you see in the movies when, it gets to the end, sort of end of the journey, and then it just falls apart. I was walking down the finish funnel, just gradually seizing up and thinking, oh my goodness, this is not good. And I thank heavens for Leonard Cheshire, who I was running for, because they had a physio set up at the end of the race, and that was, and physios were really, really good to me that day, that's for sure. But the next year, I thought, right, okay, I can do this in 3.5 hours. And so I was the opposite to you. I was aiming for a time. And actually, it was all going really, really well. I was running with a friend of mine for quite a bit of it. And then he split off from me and was going slightly quicker than me. So I just let him get on with it. And then I got to 17 miles and my left knee said, look, I can finish, but I'm not going to finish at this speed. So I kind of ended up hobbling in back in again in about 4 hours. And the amount of times on that last 9 miles of the race that people were going, because I was, I'd jog a little bit, then I'd walk, then I'd jog a little bit. We're going, go on, you can do it. And I'm going, oh no, I can do it. It just hurts.
Well, you have lots of things in your mind to the things that are said as you, and particularly being in costumes. I've had children sort of there going, "Mummy, there's a tomato," and I'm thinking, I am not a tomato, I'm an apple, or I'm a strawberry, but just because I'm bright red. So, but that's I love sort of seeing children's faces and hopefully inspiring them that you can do things in a fun way, get active and movement, and really for me, movement was my medicine. From that time where I didn't leave the house for 2 months. It was the goals that I looked at was literally going downstairs in the house. It was getting in the shower. It was cleaning my teeth. That would be a major achievement that day, or walking to the end of the garden. So it didn't all sort of start by just going and doing a marathon. It was very, very small steps to get there.
I find it fascinating, though, that you said you get very anxious about failure. And interestingly, when I went through the flying training system, just to give you a sort of a comparative story, I suppose, I really struggled going through flying training into the Air Force. I actually, in the basic flying training school, I failed, I think, apart from two, I failed every other test on the course. I spent a significant amount of time on review, which is the kind of, the spotlight's on you and you're potentially, up for the chop. And all of the last phases of the course, I failed all the tests at least once and had to do them again. So there was enormous pressure. And then suddenly it just clicked. And when I went to Valley to advanced flying training, I did much better, and it was all kind of plain sailing from there. But picking yourself up, and I talk about this as well when I speak to people, that the picking yourself up from failure, it's the old thing, isn't it? It's not how hard you fall, it's how fast you get back up. And you have demonstrably done that with just at the start of your life, where you're talking about what you did at university, or applying to university, being rejected all those times, still persisting, still getting through, and being very successful in what you did. It's just an interesting contrast that you talk about that, the fear of failure being something that triggers your anxiety, when actually you have dealt with it so brilliantly in terms of what you've actually done.
I don't know if I'd say that I did, and certainly if you ask my parents, I didn't deal with it well at the time. It was, I was distraught every time I'd get those rejection letters through. And as I say, I think it just cemented the fact that I wasn't good enough. An interesting part of it is that I wasn't good enough academically. But what those 6 years gave me the opportunity to do was I went and did so much volunteering,
Mm-hmm.
with other people. So I got more life experience. So when it did come to the interview, if I got an interview, then I was given an offer. It was just for my grades when they weren't good. It was only when I'd got the university degree that they would say that, yeah, okay, you've met the standards. And it does make me question whether or not, academically, if you don't necessarily get the best people, because they're not necessarily people, and I've always enjoyed, talking to other people, finding out about them, listening to them, and helping them. I think that's what kept me going, I guess, thinking that just this is what I want to, I'd been told I was never bright enough to be a doctor, but physio sort of sat more with what, with what I could achieve. And yeah, I got there in the end.
It's an incredible story, and I'm full of admiration. I mean, I think just you're turning it around from being in that kind of low place and doing what you do just with speaking would have been a lot, but then to do all of the the stuff you're doing with the challenges and some outstanding. I mean, swimming the channel twice. I mean, that would be the end of me. There would be no prospect of me doing that. I ended up rather bizarrely, again, at the back end of my Air Force time. I was asked if I'd be the president of RAF triathlon. Now, I was a runner, and I enjoy a bit of cycling, but not competitively. And I turned to the guy that was the director of RAF Sport, who was asking me to do this. I said, look, I've never done a triathlon in my life, and I'm not about to start. And there were reasons behind it, where actually we'd had a couple of unfortunate incidents with the previous presidents where they both actually died, one of them doing a triathlon, one of them training for one. So he said, I don't want you to do it. I want you to be just basically the figurehead for it. And which I ultimately then did do. But I was always, when I went to the events to go and give out prizes or support them, I was always incredibly impressed with discipline to be able to do 3 events well, and particularly the longer distance ones. I mean, the Ironman stuff is just beyond the pale. That's incredible. And you've done, which ultras have you done? You've done some ultras as well, you said.
Well, if I go the swimming, I was exactly the same, but I actually crewed for somebody as a physio who was doing something called the Arch to Arch. So it was running from Marble Arch to Dover, swimming the Channel, and then cycling from Calais to the Arc de Triomphe. And I was on the boat, sort of rowing with her mum, and her mum said, "Oh, you'll be swimming the Channel next." I said, "No way, no chance." Anyway, the year after, I found myself in a team doing the exact same challenge of running from Marble Arch to Dover, swimming the Channel, and then cycling from Calais to the Arc de Triomphe. And it was an all-female team, and again, it was wounded, injured, and sick. So we had two women who were in wheelchairs, and some that would use recumbent bikes and hand bikes. And yeah, we actually think we still hold the record. I think we hold the record because we are the only all-female team that have done it. So that I guess is one of the endurance events. So I've done the Marathon des Sables.
Wow.
So that was 2016 that I did that. I ran 100 miles across a frozen lake in Mongolia. I did that dressed as a chili pepper because I knew I was going to be freezing cold. It was minus 47, way colder than Antarctica. And I just thought, well, if I'm going to be freezing cold, I might as well look red hot. So I did it dressed as a chili pepper. But with that one, I hadn't actually read the small print. And on the first day, I said to the organizer, I said, I think I'm in the wrong place. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I thought I'm here to do a marathon, a marathon. He said, yeah, the marathon's today. I said, but everyone else is talking about 100 miles. And they went, yeah, that's just the second and third day. I went, okay, what's an extra 3 marathons from what I thought I was doing? So,
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
ran across the frozen lake.
And the whole of it was in minus 47, or wow. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Camping. Was camping, as well. I mean, it was so cold that you could get I went to clean my teeth and I went to put the lid back on the toothpaste, frozen, couldn't get it back on, the water, that it's frozen. I got a cup of boiling hot water, threw it up into the air and it came down as snow. So yeah, that was a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, there's just surviving in those kind of conditions, never mind actually going and doing marathons.
The Mongolian people are just incredibly hardy, people, because they live in that. I mean, the ice in the lake was so deep; it was probably about 6 or 7 meters frozen. The cars were driving across there, but to be able to get the car started in the morning, they had to light a fire to heat the engine to try and get things. So yeah, nothing was done quickly over there.
That sounds safe. Oh, brilliant! Wow, what an incredible story. I mean, you've been to the Invictus Games as well, right?
I have, yes. So actually, it was 10 days after the Marathon des Sables. I still got blisters on my feet and was in the Orlando Games. So I was fortunate to get a medal in the cycling. I did cycling and rowing for that. But yeah, an incredible. And I think, looking back, that was the real, I really needed that at the time. And it kind of was like the fire in the belly that made me kind of realize what sport could do, the impact that it could have, and that it didn't always have to be competitive. For some people, it was the fact that it gave them a routine, or it got them to sort of socialize with other people. And I've always had that in the back of my mind with sport, that it doesn't necessarily have to be about being the fastest or the fittest. I'm never going to win a marathon, but I get exactly the same medal as everybody else who takes part in that marathon. So I think with marathons, it's usually yourself that you're competing with, of whether or not you can beat your previous time. And unless I'm not comparing apples and I'm not comparing apples with oranges if I'm dressed as different fruits with it all. So yeah, and again, one marathon you can't compare to another.
No, for sure not. I mean, different conditions on the day make a huge difference. That's why, some of the extremes you've done, that 7 marathons in 7 days thing with all those different climatic conditions and the time zone thing. That's an amazing achievement. No question about it. The Invictus thing, Prince Harry gets a pretty tough rap these days for all sorts of reasons. And and I feel sorry for him from that respect, because I think what he did with Invictus was amazing, actually. And interestingly, little story from my side, he was in Afghanistan at the same time as me on his first trip to Afghanistan. So 2008, I was commanding Kandahar Airfield. And when he'd been there about 12 weeks, and then the Australian press, I think it was, ultimately sort of outed him and revealed that he was there and he had to fly home. And it just so happened coincidentally that I was on the same flight back as him, going back for some meetings. And I went and had a chat to him not long after takeoff, and I was at the front of the TriStar on the way back, and there were 2 critical care casualties in the front with the sort of full medical team that you have on those flights. And he was at the sort of the front of the main section of the aeroplane with his security guy and a couple of other people. And he was quite understandably quite frustrated about the fact that he was being sent home early. And I said, look, well done you for being there at all, and the fact that you did 12 weeks, I think is great credit before it came out. But anyway, we had the conversation for a little bit, and at the end of it, I said, "Look, it may not be your thing, or you may not be up to it, but I know there's a team of doctors and nurses up the front here who'd love to have a chat to you if you get a chance to go up the front." And of course, he's on record as saying that was the moment when he went up, and Ben McBean was one of the two casualties that was there, and who's still very much one of his kind of people that he's stayed in touch with over time. And that was the moment that he kind of started thinking about what he was going to do with Invictus. So it was great to be have that tiny little piece of it, if you like, in terms of what happened, because I do think it's an extraordinary thing that he's now done and continues to do.
It's now 10 years, well, 11 years now, because it was 2014 when it started. But I was actually very fortunate 2 weeks ago to be invited to the Invictus Horizons event in the Gherkin, and Prince Harry was there, and sort of talking about the strategy and what's looking for the future, 10 years. And so, it was incredible. I got to meet him, and he, I sort of went to shake his hand, and I said, "Oh, my name's Sally." I said, I'm usually dressed as a piece of fruit when I meet you, because I've had a couple of photos where I was dressed as a strawberry, and he said, "Sally Orange," and I said, "Yes, yeah." And he said, "Oh," he'd obviously been told about my more recent diagnosis, and he said, "Oh, I'm very sorry to hear about that." And I said, "Oh, it's okay. I'm making the best of it, and I've trekked to Everest Base Camp now dressed as a giant boob." So, yeah, and again, I think the fact that he remembers people, and for me, it's easier to remember the people who've lost limbs, because they are, quite striking and obviously different. Actually, people with mental health challenges or invisible injuries or illnesses, to remember those people is true testament to him. And yeah, it's great what it's done, but having seen the plans for the future, the future's very bright, you could say.
That's a really good thing. Glad to hear that. That's terrific. And Alice, it's a good segue, because I was going to come on and talk to you about your cancer diagnosis. I mean, you've been typical you talking to you now. You're turning adversity into triumph here, because you're very public about talking about it. You're obviously in the midst of chemotherapy at the moment, which is why, again, I'm really chuffed that you are still happy to come on and do the show. But what can you share about that? What's the the kind of story behind it that you're willing to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually back in January this year. I was in Tenerife, and I was actually training to go and climb Mount Aconcagua in Argentina, the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. And I had a day off, and I went to buy a new bikini in a changing room. And I was in the changing room, and I suddenly saw what looked like a bit of a different colour. And I thought, oh, that looks a bit different, and maybe it's the lighting. And then I felt, and it was quite high up, and I just thought, bit of a look. Oh, it's just my rib. It's just my rib. Then I felt the other side and realised that my rib weren't quite the same. And I sort of knew that it wasn't a rib. But I didn't actually tell anyone for 3 weeks, because I wanted to go to Argentina and climb Aconcagua. So I did. Unfortunately, on the way down from Aconcagua, I broke my wrist. So I went to the GP with my broken wrist and said, "Oh, by the way, I've got this lump." They said, "Yep, we'll refer you." So I was referred to the breast clinic, and while I just really thought about what I was going for, and I turned up on my own, and I had a mammogram, an ultrasound. They said, "Oh, we'll just do a few biopsies." And they did another mammogram. And then I was in with a consultant who just said, "You've got breast cancer." And I was like, "I haven't got time for breast cancer." I said, I've got the London Marathon in a few weeks' time, which I was due to be doing as a lettuce along with my vegetable theme. So it was going to say, "Let us talk about mental health." And I'd got my costume and everything ready. Was also due to be doing the Everest Marathon a second time, but this time to go and make a documentary, something that had happened from the first Everest Marathon that I'd done the year before. And so I said, it just really, and I was also supposed to be walking the length of Corsica. And they said, "Well, you can't do Corsica because that was the furthest one away." And I said, "Well, can I delay my surgery?" I had to wait and find out what type of cancer it was. Uh, and so that was a really difficult 10 days, not knowing, because I'd got my film crew were sort of, their flights were being booked to go out to Nepal, and I didn't know if I could go or not. Anyway, I got the news that I could delay it, so long as I went on a drug called tamoxifen. And basically, I'd actually already been through the menopause, and my cancer is estrogen receptive. So it likes estrogen. So I got told I needed to come off the HRT that I was already on. And then I needed to take the tamoxifen to almost, well, to block any more estrogen so that the cancer couldn't feed off it. It hadn't got anything to feed off and grow in those three weeks. But what it also did was bring about the menopausal symptoms of hot sweats. And so there I was at Everest Base Camp in freezing cold situation, temperatures, but absolutely dripping in sweat, which is fine when you're warm, but then it cools, and then I went really cold. So I had sort of extra challenges when I was doing the marathon. Uh, but I also had the confidence of knowing that I'd been to altitude with the cancer. So I knew that the cancer wasn't going to stop me being at altitude. I didn't have any symptoms, at all. So I just decided to make the best of it, and had a boob costume under my bed. I'd previously done 10 marathons in 10 days dressed as a boob. I say that I only actually did 4 because I was very, very unwell mentally at the time. But I had this costume, so I thought, well, I'll ditch the lettuce, and did the London Marathon dressed as the boob, and then got the go ahead, as I said, to do the Everest Marathon. So I trekked all the way up to base camp for 10 days with this giant boob, and then I changed for the actual marathon because the year before I'd done it as a lemon, and this time I wanted to do it as a lime. So it was ice and a slice because I knew that it was cold at the top. And the documentary was basically on the year before, because I'd worn my lemon costume. My Nepalese guide had said, why are you dressed as a lemon? And I explained, and he said, you have depression. And I said, yeah. I said, but I still take medication and I see a therapist, and so I manage it. And he said, do you think I have anxiety? And I said, no. He was, really fun, gregarious guide. He said, I really do. I really struggle. And I said, how do you manage it? And he said, alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
It really sort of made sense about some of the things. Anyway, after the marathon, he came to me and he said, I need your help. I need your charity's help. And I said, I don't have a charity, but I raise money for charity. Let's see what there is in Nepal that can help you. And over the next year, he went to his GP and he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we kept in contact sort of over the year. And so he said, Sally, you've helped me. I could help other people by telling my story, which is what I wanted to go back and do the documentary about. And also for the documentary, I sort of met up with Sir Chris Bonington, who obviously has, summited Everest. But it's more about, the title of the documentary is When Life Gives You Lemons, Everyone's Everest. Because we all have our own mountains to climb, but they don't have to be that physical one. And I also, on the documentary, I sort of look at the tools and techniques that can be used to help battle that inner climb of Everest. And sort of talk about mindfulness and meditation, and how to manage those things with professionals and experts. So that's just going through post-production editing at the moment, which is all quite exciting.
Yeah, really great. No, I should look forward to seeing that. That'd be fantastic.
Very lucky in that we because it's veterans who've it's filmed by veterans. It features veterans because Sir Chris was in the army. He was actually in the Air Force before the army, and Harry Budamagar, he climbed Everest, double above knee amputee. So he features in it as well. So it's filmed by veterans, features veterans, and although it's for veterans, but it's also the wider population that hopefully it will, sort of be of help and use to. But we also recognise that the creative arts. So poetry can be very helpful for mental health, whether that writing it or reading it. So we put out a competition and sort of wanting to connect nature and the outdoors with mental health and the benefits of it. And the winner of the competition is having their poem read by Dame Joanna Lumley on the film, who has got a beautiful voice, and obviously she's got the connection to the Gurkhas and Nepal. And we also feature cadets and the Outward Bound Trust and the Duke of Edinburgh's Award in there as well. So yeah, sort of from young people up to 91-year-old Sir Chris, 92 now, actually 92-year-old Sir Chris as well. So hoping to cover sort of every age group. And whilst it started off with the mental health journey and story, it then developed, because of my situation, into the breast cancer side of it as well. And as 1 in 4 people will struggle with their mental health or know somebody who struggled with their mental health, and 1 in 2 with breast cancer, we really do hope that it can help a lot of people.
I'm sure it will. That's again, your story just is incredibly inspiring. I mean, as if it's not enough to have done all the mental health thing, to now be doing it on the cancer side as well is extraordinary. I mean, how are you now? Sort of where are you now on that journey?
Yeah, so I had surgery, and unfortunately they found that it had gone to the lymph nodes as well. So originally I was told that I would probably just need surgery and then radiotherapy. But and I was kind of like, that's fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, then I found out I've got to have 6 months of chemotherapy. So I've had one treatment of that. My next one's next Wednesday. But again, I'm really wanting to use that movement as medicine. So I'm running to all of my hospital appointments. So even my chemotherapy, I'm running there, having the 3 hours of the drip, and then walking home after that. But I've got a PICC line in my arm, which is where chemo goes into. And every week I have to go and have that flushed out. So I have to go up to the hospital, but I run up to that appointment and run back. And even just last week, I ran up, and one of the patients sitting in the waiting area said, "Have you cycled here?" Because I was in shorts and t-shirt. And I said, No, I've ran. What? He said, "You've ran here?" And then I said, "Well, I just want to show that, with cancer you could stay active, and it helps to stay active." And he said, "You've really inspired me." I said, "Well, if you just park your car a few, rows further than you normally would, then that just give, he was an older gentleman going for chemotherapy. So yeah, that's the thing. And also by me being open about it, I've had 4 women, or 5 now actually, who've got in contact with me and said, because of your posts on social media and because of you being so open, I've checked myself, found a lump, and I also now have breast cancer. And I wouldn't have checked had you not said. So, that's the benefit of, not having it as a taboo subject, because other people are now sort of on that treatment journey as well.
Yeah, I think both on the social media posting side of life, in terms of raising awareness and inspiring other people both to check themselves and just be aware generally, but also that, as you say, that sporting story. I can well imagine. I mean, that's the sort of jaw-dropping effect you would have walking into the chemo with other people going, "You what?" Because most people, for very good reasons, I'm perfectly sure, do not think at all like that, and have a very different reaction. So the fact you are doing that in such a positive way is incredibly inspiring, and well done you. It's just amazing. And well, I really hope it it continues to be okay for you, and that you come out the far end of it and return to your normal crazy self doing all these amazing challenges.
I did this morning. My hair at the moment it comes out in clumps. At the moment, I sort of know after next week that it will be on a lot. But yeah, it was all over the pillow this morning. I was like, oh gosh, was there a hamster in my bed? But yeah, it is. And I think, that's the thing with my chemotherapy, is that it almost becomes visible because of, wearing a headscarf or not having that. But there's also lots of chemotherapy treatments that don't have visible effects. And I'm also on social media wanting to be very open about the the other thing. So, I put a picture the other day of all the different drugs that I have to take. And they're the drugs that I have to combat the side effects of the chemotherapy. So the anti-sickness drugs, the steroids. I have to self-inject for 5 days within the within the treatment cycle, because your white blood cell count goes low, and so the injection is to increase them. And I've called my PICC line Penelope because it's Penelope Pick Stop. And yes, she'll help me get around the track, track quicker, so they don't have to invasively go in and take blood. You have to have blood samples, check that your levels are right before you have the chemotherapy. Now, I almost had a training session in chemotherapy because unfortunately, this time last year, my dad was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer, and I went along to all of his chemotherapy sessions with him. He was told he's probably only got 9 months, but I'm really pleased to say that he's 12 months. He's still with us, and they've stopped the chemotherapy now, but they are still doing immunotherapy, and he's doing really, really well. So
great. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. Yeah, I've lost a couple of family members to esophageal cancer, actually. That's a really nasty one.
Pretty horrible. Yeah, it's a pretty horrible one. And it's already spread to, his liver. So, yeah, it's giving us a double whammy in the Orange household.
For sure. I mean, and it does, as you say, it affects a lot of people. And I think mental health as well affects an awful lot of people. And is a story that, I mean, just in the military context, I'm sure is far from finished. When you look at the 20 years in Afghanistan and all the time in Iraq before that, and the impact that's going to have had on an awful lot of people that were there. So, and again, beyond the military, there are millions of people who are on varying levels suffering with their own mental health. And I think from a societal point of view, you'll have a much more informed view than me on this, but I think it is very, very good that a lot of companies are now more focused on it. There's more discussion about it. There's more kind of mental health champions in the workplace and those kind of things. So it's getting a much better airing, whereas it was previously, as you said a minute ago, visible injuries or disabilities of some sort, people respond to. So if someone's in a wheelchair, then it's really obvious that they're going to need some additional help to do what they're actually going to do to get to work and be at work and all that sort of thing. It's much less obvious if you've got some kind of mental health invisible or any other form of non-visible disability. So, that's a definite plus, but it's people like you that are, without a doubt, giving that the airing that is making a difference to that. And you should be giving yourself an enormously big pat on the back for that, because it's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I tend to talk quite a lot about leadership on the show, Sally, and I think you've had an amazing set of experiences in terms of your time before you got into the military, then the time in the military, subsequently working with a lot of really influential people. I'm just really interested in what you've seen in yourself about, because you may not think of it this way, but you are definitely a leader big time in terms of what you're doing. You're leading a charge in terms of inspiring people and doing the stuff you're doing, but also the people you've worked with. What's, the traits you think are important, the behaviors, how you've adapted, how you've shifted, what you see in all of that.
It's funny because I never really think of myself as a leader.
I thought you'd say that.
I have to, if I go back to my physio days, which I don't really practice anymore, but essentially as a physiotherapist, you are a leader to your patient. You're guiding them with what they need to do, and hopefully sort of encouraging them and inspiring them. But for me, what really was sort of true to what was needed was empathy and compassion. If you had and I'd have physio myself, but if you had a doctor or a professional or whatever, and they don't have that empathy and compassion, I don't think you get the best out of. For me, I always wanted to get the best out of my patients so that they could recover and go on and do things. And for me, I'm someone who, if I don't have that empathy and that compassion, I don't respond very well, and it can have a real negative impact. And I certainly know that I've had leaders who don't have that empathy, and it's had a really detrimental impact on me. Particularly, I mean, there's a flip side to it. People would often kind of say that I was quite sensitive, and I am sensitive, and I recognise that. And whilst I always thought that was a negative, actually, as a profession, as a physiotherapist, if you don't have empathy, then, if you're not sensitive, you don't pick up on the cues that, maybe somebody's in pain, or why aren't they doing their exercises? You need to sometimes get deeper to find out the real why, and that's different for different people. So it's treating people as individuals, being interested in them, and yeah, just sort of trying to help people, essentially, I guess.
Yeah, totally right. I think empathy is a really important leadership trait for, frankly, any leader. And you're right. There are lots of people who are amazing at it, and there are also lots of people who are not. And I think particularly the more extrovert, gregarious, kind of more hierarchical leaders, not because they're necessarily hierarchical themselves, but they're in hierarchies. There is a risk some of the time that they're not very empathetic. They don't take the time to understand why is somebody not necessarily performing in the way they might have done. Is that just because they've suddenly become rubbish at what they do? Very unlikely. It's much more likely there's something else going on that they need to start unpacking and getting to the bottom of. And equally, getting the best out of people where if you want to understand what someone is thinking, you need to give them the time and space. If they're quite introverted and quite a reflective kind of person, to make sure they've got that time. If you're just jumping to an immediate conclusion, I mean, I'm very much I know myself. I am quite extrovert. I'm quite I'm quite demanding. My wife would say I'm very demanding, and I'm not very good at this sort of stuff at all. And it's interesting how in personal relationships, I think it's different some of the time to work relationships, because I think in the work setting, I've learned a lot to adapt and get better at creating the space to listen to other people, and that is such an important trait. I totally agree with you.
I think something that I've learned and sort of did within physio practice is that not everybody uses words very well. And so for some people, actually numbers work better. So we would always say to a patient, on a scale of 0 to 10, how is your pain? Because pain is so subjective, but we want to know how it is for them. And it's the same really with mental health. And I say this to workplaces, that when you're asking your colleague how they are, just ask them how they are out of 10. Now, if somebody is always a 7 and they're suddenly a 5, something's not quite right. Whereas, some people they might fluctuate a lot more, but you get to know an individual, on a scale as such. And it's not as quite as intrusive as, that when we say, oh, yeah, fine, and we know that fine can mean not fine at all.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody who, and if you think of neurodiverse people, they take what is said. You said you were fine. I didn't need to ask any more, any more questions. But we know that quite often when we say fine, we don't always mean it. So, to help sort of neurodiverse people by giving a number, maybe just gives them a cue. Okay, they weren't the same as they were yesterday. They were less better than they were, or they were better. So just a different, just a different way that, is sort of taking that transferable skill from my physio practice into, the workplace.
Yeah. Do you know Liz McConaughey?
I do, yes.
Yeah, because Liz talks about exactly the same thing, where she gives it a number and talks about it, and and she also says very much the same vein. She says, ask someone twice, because quite often they'll give you a different answer the second time. Their first response, yeah, I'm fine, and then actually, no, how are you really?
How are you really?
Yeah. It's quite interesting, I think, and she's very much in the same space you are in terms of talking about mental health in a very, very powerful way. She did a podcast with me some time ago, and that was another very inspiring episode from someone that really has been to the dark side of this and returned from it. No, great stuff. You obviously, it's a question I ask a lot on the podcast, but I think it's going to have more resonance for you than many of my guests. You had a fairly tough start to your kind of transition into working life and just even the sort of back end of your academic time. If you went back in time and you had, the whole of it again, what would you be saying to a young Sally now in terms of advice?
Yes, in some ways, it's what my mum told me, but I never believed at the time. Mum used to always say, it's character building, Sally. And I would just say, I don't want a character, because everything, just sort of seemed to yeah, not go right. But I think, now I would say to young people who have sort of struggled that you will become a better person because of what you've gone through. You can't always see it at the time, but you'll learn different skills, and even if it's for somebody else in the future, that you can say, I know what that's like, but actually I've come out of it and this is what it's like now. So to sort of be that guiding star almost, to sort of say, I promise you it will get better. You just have to believe me. It's very difficult when you're in that place, you know, when it is so dark and you can't see any way out of it. And sometimes you have to make some tough choices. And I say choices because, quite often I would say, well, I don't have a choice in this. We do always have a choice. They're not always necessarily the choices that we want to take, but they generally are, choices. And we are very, very privileged in this country with the choices that we have. And sometimes it's just remembering that as well, how we are in comparison to other people. Well, I say that comparison is the thief of joy. Um, but I think if we can use it in a positive way of thinking things could be a lot worse, it can sort of help you. And certainly with my cancer journey at the moment, I'm very grateful for every day that I feel okay. I don't feel okay on every single day, but the days or the half days that I do, I'm, incredibly grateful for that. And I think another thing that I would say with the cancer is going back to what I said previously and the goals. It's sort of, I don't call them goals with my chemotherapy, because for me, if I set myself goals of, right, I want to do this next week, or that, 3 things today that I want to do, if I don't make those goals, then I feel a failure. So I've now just changed the wording of calling them aspirations. So in that day, aspire to be able to, go for a run, to, cook a healthy meal and maybe see someone. But if I don't achieve that, I don't beat myself up about it. There's always the next day to try and do that. So goals are fantastic for the right people. But for me on this cancer journey, I'm just calling them aspirations, and then I don't beat myself up.
Yeah, I think that's really important that you do exactly that. Don't beat yourself up for things that have not gone quite the way you wanted them to. And there's a bit of truth in there, isn't there? In the song title, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I mean, I think that's definitely true. If you're receptive to knowing that actually there is an opportunity to build on whatever setbacks you've had, don't fold, just actually use it as feedback, use it to to develop, so you improve yourself for next time, and it can make a real difference. And that's very, very powerful.
I think, the way that I feel that I'm coping with the cancer journey is probably because of what I've been through with my mental health journey, and this doesn't feel anywhere near as bad as that. That there's a lot more support when you say that when you've been open about that you have cancer. It's just ironic because I feel fine, had no symptoms. I had a little bit of surgery, that set me back a little bit, but now because things are becoming visible, it's incredible. Whereas there was none of that support with my mental health, and there are still people that are mentioning the cancer and they don't say anything because I don't think they know what to say or how to say. And again, it's having to understand that of other people, because to begin with, I'm like, told them I've got cancer, and they're telling me about their, something really trivial that's happened. And I think sometimes it's just a case of recognizing that the world isn't always about you. There's a lot of people are interested in themselves and nothing else. And initially, I quite often took that quite personally, that they didn't have an interest in anything that I just said. But it's just, the way we're very fast paced, and we're very, we've got things coming in left, right, and centre, that we don't always have the time to reflect on things, I guess.
Yeah, it's fascinating you say that. I think it's very often people just don't know what to say. I think that's the same with bereavements and things like that, isn't it? There are some people who they I've heard it from people. I've just told them I've just lost my mum, and and actually it's like they don't care. And I don't think it is they don't care. I just think it's they're completely at a loss of what to say. They haven't thought about it. Interestingly, one of the things we did when I was in the flying world, we used to actively think about how you were going to manage breaking the worst kind of news to families and things like that, because you have to do that. You have to have a plan. You have to have a strategy as to how you're going to manage it, and what the aftercare is going to be and all that sort of thing, because I think it's really important. And some of the time it's just not something that people think about enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Highs and lows, Sally. I always talk about highs and lows. I'm kind of curious to know, I mean, in amongst a huge collection of things you have done, what's the high point?
I think, I mean, there's a couple, because actually, after that 9-year journey of finally becoming a physiotherapist, that was, such a long time to get there, that was a high point. And the honorary doctorate, as I say, was something that I never ever expected. But a couple of years ago, I did receive a letter that said that I was going to be made an MBE. So that for me is something that just, I'm not from a background or family that sort of that's ever happened to, I don't think anyone in my family knows anyone who has one. So, but I like to sort of say that it stands for Marathon Babe Extraordinaire. But a friend now changed it to My Boobs Run Everest, from the latest one. But yeah, I mean that was an incredible honor. And in fact, this week, I just last night actually, it was on the TV because I've been shortlisted finalist for the Pride of Britain Fundraiser of the Year award, and it's the regional one, and then whoever wins that then goes to the actual Pride of Britain awards. But just to have, yeah, to be recognised under that, that title is 18 years ago when I started fundraising. It was never had that in mind as such, but it's just the journey that it's taken me on. So there you've got something that, 25 years ago that I was proud of, but even yesterday, and today I'm still proud of. So,
Oh, too right. Fantastic. I mean, amusingly, the MBE, OBE thing, I mean, the other spelling out for those acronyms is my bloody efforts and others'
the
bloody
bugger's
efforts.
efforts. Yeah, yeah.
And that I think it's that's quite appropriate, to be honest, because I think obviously those kind of awards don't come around all the time. So well done you. That's fantastic. And Pride of Britain, that. Well, good luck. I really hope you end up in the kind of the final version of it, because by any measure, it would seem to me you are a Pride of Britain in terms of what you've done. You absolutely deserve to get that kind of accolade. So it's terrific stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, wait and see.
Yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed firmly for you. That's for sure. I mean, sadly, for every high point, there is a low point. I mean, and I guess there's probably a few of those that you could choose from as well. But if you had to pick one, what's the low point?
The low point was when I was under the care of the crisis team, and I didn't out of bed, I didn't wash, I didn't speak. For 20 hours of every day, I just cried and just wished that I was dead. And the other 4 hours I was on sleeping tablets. Didn't work very well, so I only got 4 hours sleep. So yeah, that was you know, I just remember sitting and looking out my window at the train track, and I could just see myself under the train rather than on the train. That's where I wanted to be. So that, I mean, it's still very, very vivid. Even now, I had to go and live back at my parents', and when I go into that room, my mum was sort of telling me that I would be sectioned if I didn't eat. I just didn't have any desire to eat. It was just too much effort. I kind of describe it that there was no color in the world. There was no taste. There was just wanted to evaporate.
Wow. How did you turn the corner? What brought you back from that?
Medication. I remember the psychiatrist coming round, and my medication was increased to get to a point where, yeah, I could at least sort of function. As I say, it was very, very slowly, and the community psychiatric nurse, they would come and they'd try and take me out for coffee, and I would just sit in a cafe crying. So it wasn't joyful going out. And yeah, just real little steps of yeah, just that one step in front of another.
And how long did that process take, if you don't mind me asking? I mean, from being in that really, really dark space to then being kind
A couple of months
back to normal?
back to normal. Yeah, but months to a year. As I say, I didn't answer the phone for 2 years. I was just so scared of, and even text messages. I had to be with someone to read the text message because my mind would take it somewhere else. And I just was very clever at making it into something negative. So it was a lot of therapy. And as I say, I still take medication now, and I still see a therapist now. So it's ongoing. But I now liken it to a personal trainer. If you have a personal trainer and then you stop using a personal trainer, you get into bad habits and you don't do what you need to. And I also say as well that you wouldn't learn to swim in a storm. So it's just as important when you're well to do and work out the things that help you so that when you need to use them, you're very good at them when you're not so well. And recognizing what those things are that do help you. Because when you're not very well, you can't think. I have to have a list on my phone of the people that I can call or that I call friends because I forget that when I'm not doing well. I sort of think, oh, I've got nobody. I live on my own. I've got nobody. But yeah, it's who are the people that I can call, and I have to have pictures of people on my phone to remind me that maybe I would be missed if I wasn't here. Because for me, I recognize now that I can go into that situation very, very quickly. It's not a case of a downward slope, it's a cliff edge. And knowing that now can be more helpful.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, again, I mean, everything you've said is just so inspiring, and I can see how that will be a real challenge in all sorts of ways. And I can equally, I'm struggling a bit for the words because I mean, I'm fortunate. I've never been in that place. And when I look at you and talk to you, and it's actually very similar to when I talk to Liz McConaughey about this stuff, because both of you are vibrant, bright, bubbly people who do immensely inspiring things, and are just amazing humans. And it's difficult to kind of imagine from my side how you would be, back to your Nepali guide, to turn around and go, how on earth, you have depression? It is that difficult thing. But obviously, one of the things you are clearly doing so brilliantly is, bringing it to other people to make them feel it's okay, to help them to get some, help themselves and give them some coping strategies potentially. And back to your old man with the chemotherapy. I mean, those kind of inspiring little things. I mean, I think it's not necessarily the big things; it's the little things as well that make a huge difference. And because that must be a really constant challenge to live with. I feel for you. I think and I'm not surprised at all that that's your low point.
I think we become very good at hiding things. You have I don't realize that I have strategies for different situations that will get me out of things, very quickly or very easily. But I've just built up these strategies that I've always done and don't realize that other people don't do them. So yeah, but it's really important to share those with other people, so that they know they're not the only one, or if they, if they think they're the only one, well, this is what I use to help me, or this is what I use to help me, so that they can potentially use that recipe book, I guess, because not everything works for everybody, and you've got to sort of pick out the things that work for you. And those ingredients will be different for different people.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, when you do your speaking and just generally in life, I'm really sort of interested in what's the one or two pieces of advice you would offer that you haven't already talked about to people listening to this or viewing this, to think about if they are struggling a bit themselves. What would you throw to them?
So quite often I will say that you're far more capable than you think you are. You can push yourself a lot further than you think you can. And you often don't realize that until you're in certain situations when people will say, well, I just wouldn't be able to deal with that. You sort of, until you're presented with it, you don't know what you can or can't do. So I think that's something. And, and with other things, I use them. I use Nike and they're just do it in that I say juice do it. Because quite often we think, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. But it's looking at what can you do? And we can all do something, particularly with exercise, we can all do something. I genuinely believe that anyone, if they really wanted to or if they had to, that they could run a marathon. And the reason I say that is because if you had a child or a loved one that was 26.2 miles away from you, and there's no cars, there's no trains, there's no buses, but if they were in trouble, then you'd find a way of getting to them. It wouldn't necessarily be as quick as the person next to you, but you would find a way, of getting there, because if your drive and your purpose is strong enough, then you'll find a way to do it. And I think evidence of that was Ukraine. And I distinctly remember the pictures of, pushchairs, being left at the border because, they had to walk. And so we are more capable than we think we are. And whilst we'll say, oh, well, I wouldn't be able to deal with that, until you're faced with it, you don't know how you will deal with it. I think that's a better response, is you wouldn't know how. You would, not that you wouldn't, it might be somebody's time to absolutely flourish.
Mm. No, and the one thing I'm absolutely sure of is people like you saying some of this stuff and showcasing the way and being as open as you are about it is definitely going to be very, very helpful to lots of people.
I do make sure that I show the not so good times as well, because as you say, I think sometimes it can be, well, it's all right for you. How would you know? And I distinctly remember this from physio. I remember having a patient and she'd had a knee replacement, and she said to me, I said, right, you just need to do this exercise. Come on, do this. She went, oh, you've got no idea. So I pulled up my leg, pulled up my trouser leg, and showed I've got a scar that long on my leg from when I broke it when I was 16. And I said, I've been where you've been. I completely understand. And she went, wow, you really do. And I said, I know that these exercises hurt and they're hard and it takes effort. But believe me, when you've done that, you can get back to doing the things that are normal in life. And again, it was that visible scar that showed. I don't think I'm going to
Yeah.
do that with my boob.
I think, yeah,
Let's just get people take that for themselves.
personal credibility makes a lot of difference in this space, doesn't it? And I think that sort of example is terrific. And of course, you haven't gone back to being normal. You've gone back to being very abnormal. I mean, some of the things you do are incredible. I mean, no one 87 marathons just is stuck in my head as an extraordinary thing. And I mean, with that in mind, I've got two questions that I always ask at the end, and one of them is about, I normally ask people, what's the most memorable event of your life? And I think we talked a bit about the high points and all those sorts of things. I want to be a bit more specific with you. And what's, of all of those extreme things you've done, and the challenges you've put yourself through, what's the most memorable one?
Great question. I think probably the World Marathon Challenge. It is quite a recent one, but also that breaking of that leg. I mean, I have the reminder every single day, but I distinctly remember when I was at school, and the reason my scar is so prominent is that they left the stitches in for 6 weeks. Back in them days, they weren't dissolvable stitches, so all my skin had grown over them, and My leg was really thin. It wasted away. And I just remember the geography teacher, I plucked up the courage to wear a skirt. And he went, "Oh, look at you showing off your scar." And I just was like, goodness, is this what, is it seen as, it's just part of me. And I actually use it in schools when I speak in schools. I was very fortunate to win an award. Um, and I was actually showing my mum the award, and there was that very split second where my mum gave the award. It was a glass trophy with my name engraved on it. Defence Discount Services Inspirational Woman. And there was that split second when mum was handing it to me and I was, getting it. And neither of us had got hold of it, and it dropped, smashed to the floor. And she went, what are you going to do? Because they'd asked me to go up to them and give a talk and take the trophy with me. What are you going to do? I said, "What I can do, is there?" I said, "It's broke, it's thousands of pieces and these big pieces.
Super glue's not going to crack it."
Yeah. So anyway, I went up the next day, gave the talk, and then they said, "Oh, have you got the photo? We'll get that." I went, slight problem. Told them what had happened, and they said, "It's okay. We'll get you another one." I said, "What, really?" And they said, "Yeah, it's fine. I'll pay for it." No, don't worry. Anyway, I was driving home, and I suddenly thought, "Do you know what? Need a brand new shiny trophy that looks pristine. I'm broken. I've been broken. I've got bits of me missing." So I just stuck it back together. It's got a huge scar in the middle of it and it sits on the side, and people will say, "What's happened to that?" And I just say it's so much more of an interesting trophy than any of the others. And so, young people, you don't necessarily have to have a trophy to tell your story. That trophy tells my story with the bits missing and the scars it's got through the middle of it.
Oh, fantastic. No, great answer. And yeah, I love the broken trophy thing. Have you got a new one as well? Did they send you a new one?
No, I said I don't need it.
Okay.
Don't need it.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good for you. I mean, the last question that I always ask everybody and gets very variable answers is, what's the most difficult question you've ever been asked?
Yes, that is probably the most difficult question I've ever been asked.
You're not the first person to say that.
That probably is. I'm clearly not unique.
No, you're not. Any others though that you would think of?
Yes, actually, when people ask me about my depression and anxiety, I'm quite often asked what it was, if there was a key incident or something that sort of started it. And that's a really difficult question because there isn't, I wasn't, in combat and a certain thing happened and that's what I associate it with. It's just lots of almost micro traumas that I now know through therapy, which I just thought were normal. I didn't know that they were trauma as such. And so I do find it difficult when people ask, because I haven't got a real answer for it. It would be, and I often for a long time almost wished that I had PTSD, not because I don't have PTSD. I have a lot of the symptoms of it, which are depression and anxiety, difficulty sleeping, but I don't have that. But I feel that people understood the label PTSD a little bit more, despite the fact, as I say, depression and anxiety being a symptom of that label. That might just have been a bit easier for people to understand, whereas
yeah, really interesting. I think, again, it goes back to that point. I think, are you seeing this get better with people having a better understanding about it now? Because it feels to me, I've been around quite a long time these days, and wind the clock back not that many years really, and it was one of those things I would just kind of get over it. You're just a bit depressed is almost a throwaway line that actually cheer up, you'll be fine tomorrow. Where obviously it is. If you've properly got depression, it's a serious thing, and it's it needs treatment, it needs care, and it needs proper understanding. And there's a very different requirement to pay attention to that. Do you think that's improved?
I think there's the automatic assumption that because I was in the military, when I say I've had mental health problems,
It's PTSD.
And in fact, it got me into trouble one time because somebody sort of within the hierarchy went around telling people I'd got PTSD, and I hadn't. And there's nothing on my medical records. And then I was told there's nothing on your medical record saying you've got PTSD. I said, because I haven't got it. I've never, ever claimed to have had it. But somebody had made the assumption. And I then said to them, look, if I told you that I had problems with my stomach, are you qualified to tell me whether that is, ulcerative colitis, whether it's Crohn's, whether it's... So just because it's got this umbrella term of mental health problems, you can't say that I've got PTSD. So again, it was just trying to educate people that just because I was in the military doesn't mean that I have, PTSD.
No, quite right. I don't know where to start, really. I've had some inspiring people on the podcast, Sally, but I'm blown away by what you have done, what you are doing, what you're going through now, and your kind of approach to handling it. I think it's just extraordinary. What a privilege to have had a chat with you. I think you are, without a doubt, continuing to shine a light on these really difficult challenges, mental health 1, cancer 2, and all credit to you for that, because it's quite extraordinary, really. I really hope that you progress through the rest of your cancer journey and come out the end of it as the person that clearly you are, going back to doing the things you do. And I wish you the very best of luck for the Pride of Britain as well, because that will be a wonderful thing to see.
That's really, really, really kind of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I probably would just like to finish by saying the future's bright. The future's orange.
Yeah, exactly. You could advertise for a company with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so Nike with my juice do it, and then orange with with
brilliant.
that as well. But no, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been great. Thank you very much indeed, Sally. Very best of luck to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I really hope you've enjoyed this amazing episode with Sally Orange. As I said at the beginning, I think she's incredibly inspirational, fantastic lady in all sorts of ways, with incredible resilience and obviously a level of self-determination that is way beyond normal mortals, really. If you've liked it and you've enjoyed it, then please do like it. Please share it. Please post it. Please comment. Please push it around your own networks. Get more people to listen to this amazing story from this amazing woman. And if you valued it and you find it really useful, and if you value some of the other content I provide, then as ever, please think about going to Patreon and financially supporting the podcast. You can do that by going to the support the show link in the show notes for this on your podcast platform, or on YouTube in the show notes. Again, the link will be there to take you to www.patreon.com/leading4life. And you'll find the opportunity there to be a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show. Doesn't cost much. It's about a cup of coffee a month if you're going at the base level. And a cup of coffee a month is not that much, really. And I really hope you can think about supporting what we do with the show, because if you are finding it valuable and you're finding it really useful to you and something you listen to regularly, then do me a favor and just help me out a little bit with keeping it going, because that would make a big difference to me. But as ever, I'm delighted you're here. I really would like your feedback as well. So if you've got feedback, please let me have it by whatever means you like. And that would be terrifically appreciated, because I do really pay attention to it, even if I'm not quick at getting back to people as I might be sometimes. But I do really, really listen and read everything you send me. So thank you very much for that. And I really hope to see you again, or have you listening again very soon. Thanks very much. Bye now.